The young Canadian, who could not have been more than 15, had hesitated too long. For a frozen moment, his feet had stopped moving on the floating logs in the basin above the river bend. He'd slipped entirely underwater before anyone could grab his outstretched hand. One of the loggers had reached for the youth's long hair. The older man's fingers groped around in the frigid water, which was thick, almost soupy, with sloughed-off slabs of bark. Then two logs collided hard on the would-be rescuer's arm, breaking his wrist. The carpet of moving logs had completely closed over the young Canadian, who never surfaced. Not even a hand or one of his boots broke out of the brown water. Out on a log jam, once the key log was pried loose, the river drivers had to move quickly and continually. If they paused for even a second or two, they would be pitched into the torrent. In a river drive, death among moving logs could occur from a crushing injury before you had a chance to drown, but drowning was more common. From the riverbank, where the cook and his 12-year-old son could hear the cursing of the logger whose wrist had been broken, it was immediately apparent that someone was in more serious trouble than the would-be rescuer, who'd freed his injured arm and had managed to regain his footing on the flowing logs. His fellow river drivers ignored him. They moved with small, rapid steps toward shore, calling out the lost boy's name. The loggers ceaselessly prodded with their pike poles, directing the floating logs ahead of them. The rivermen were, for the most part, picking the safest way ashore, but to the cook's hopeful son, it seemed that they might have been trying to create a gap of sufficient width for the young Canadian to emerge. In truth, there were now only intermittent gaps between the logs. The boy who'd told them his name was Angel Pope from Toronto was that quickly gone. "Is it Angel?" the 12-year-old asked his father. This boy, with his dark brown eyes and intensely serious expression, could have been mistaken for Angel's younger brother, but there was no mistaking the family resemblance that the 12-year-old bore to his ever-watchful father. The cook had an aura of controlled apprehension about him, as if he routinely anticipated the most unforeseen disasters, and there was something about his son's seriousness that reflected this. In fact, the boy looked so much like his father that several of the woodsmen had expressed their surprise that the son didn't also walk with his dad's pronounced limp. The cook knew too well that indeed it was the young Canadian who had fallen under the logs.